In 5 minutes, you will wish you had read that page. Alicia Monroe's voice was calm, but the second handcuff had already closed around her wrist beneath the cold white lights of Meridian Federal Bank. Officer Grant Holloway stood behind her, certain he was controlling a fraud suspect. Across the marble counter, a $50,000 cashier's check request sat fully approved, its final authorization page folded beneath his hand. No one in the crowded lobby understood why Alicia was not afraid, why she kept looking at that document, or why the young teller behind the counter had gone pale. What Holloway did not know was that one signature on that page could change every balance of power in the room. Subscribe and stay with this story, because the truth hidden inside that transaction was larger than anyone in the bank could imagine. Alicia turned her head just enough to see Karen Whitmore, the branch manager, standing beside the secure workstation with her arms folded. Karen's expression held the quiet confidence of someone who believed the uniform beside her had already proven her right. She became uncooperative when I asked where the money came from, Karen said. Alicia's jaw tightened, but her voice remained controlled. The account record already shows where it came from. Holloway glanced at Karen instead of the screen. We will sort that out. 2 hours earlier, Alicia had entered the branch alone wearing a simple cream blouse beneath her mother's faded navy coat. The morning temperature had barely reached 40 degrees, and the old wool carried a faint scent of cedar from the closet where she kept it. She had no security detail, no assistant, and no polished company car waiting outside. In one hand, she carried a worn leather bag. In the other, she held the purchase documents for a vacant brick building on East Mercer Street. By noon, a $50,000 cashier's check had to reach the title company or the seller could accept another offer. The building had once been a neighborhood bank branch. Soon, Alicia hoped, it would become a free financial learning center for teenagers and working families. Ethan Cole, the young black teller, had greeted her with professional warmth. He reviewed her identification, entered the scheduled transaction code, and watched the system return a green approval. Everything is verified, Ms. Monroe, he said. I just need your signature. Alicia signed the electronic pad. The process should have ended there. Then Karen approached. Her eyes moved first to the amount on the screen, then to Alicia's coat, then to the worn edges of her handbag. $50,000 is a significant request, Karen said. What kind of work do you do? Alicia looked at her. Is that required for the transaction? Karen's smile remained, but the warmth vanished from it. We sometimes conduct enhanced verification. Then verify it, Alicia replied. The executive contact is listed on the account. Ethan nodded. The authorization is complete. Karen ignored him. She asked Alicia to explain the source of the funds, the purpose of the property purchase, and whether someone had instructed her to request the check. Each question sounded official. None appeared on Ethan's screen. Alicia answered what policy required and declined the rest. Karen stepped into her glass office and quietly placed an internal fraud hold on the transaction. 10 minutes later, Holloway and Officer Rachel Bennett entered through the revolving doors. Ethan immediately printed the approval record. Officer, the account has been authenticated, he said. Holloway took the pages, glanced at the first line, and folded them shut. Rachel saw the green executive code at the bottom. Her eyes paused there. She said nothing. Alicia looked directly at Holloway. What evidence do you have besides her suspicion? He did not answer. He only pointed toward the floor beside the counter. Put your bag down and turn around. Now, with the entire lobby watching, Alicia stood restrained beside her approved transaction while the final page remained unread. Ethan stared at it. Rachel stared at it. And beneath Holloway's hand, Alicia's name waited beside a title no one had bothered to notice. For several seconds, the only sound in the lobby was the soft electronic hum of the teller screens. Alicia stood beside the marble counter with her wrists secured behind her, her mother's coat pulled tight across her shoulders, while Holloway held the folded authorization pages as if they were meaningless. Ethan remained behind the counter, staring at the document. Officer, the final page identifies the approving executive, he said. Holloway did not look at him. You have already said enough. Karen stepped closer, speaking with the polished patience she used when she wanted authority to sound reasonable. Mr. Cole is a junior employee. He does not understand how sophisticated account fraud can be. Ethan's face tightened. I understand the verification system. Karen turned toward him. Return to your station. Alicia watched the exchange and understood exactly what Karen was doing. She was not defending procedure. She was protecting her first assumption. Ask him to show you the approval code, Alicia said. Holloway glanced over his shoulder. You are not directing this investigation. Then direct it, Alicia replied. Read the page. A few customers shifted near the waiting area. One man lowered his deposit slip. A woman beside the entrance quietly raised her phone. Rachel noticed but did not tell her to stop. Her attention remained on the folded document in Holloway's hand. She had seen enough of the green code to know it did not belong to an ordinary account review. It was the type of executive clearance used when a transaction had already passed several levels of internal security. Grant, she said carefully, we should confirm the authorization before we proceed. Holloway's expression hardened. The manager reported attempted impersonation. Karen nodded quickly. The customer refused to explain the source of the funds. Alicia looked directly at her. The source was verified before you walked over. You became defensive, Karen replied. I declined questions your own system did not require. Alicia's voice stayed even. That is not the same thing. Karen crossed her arms. People with legitimate business usually cooperate. The sentence settled over the room with a weight Karen seemed not to hear. Ethan did. Rachel did. So did every customer who had stopped pretending not to listen. Alicia felt the old wool at her wrists and remembered her mother sitting on a bus with an unopened account packet pressed against her knees. The manager that day had also used careful words. Additional review. Documentation concerns. Inconsistent information. Her mother had possessed every paper they requested, but none of it had been enough to overcome the story already written about her. Alicia drew a slow breath. Officer Bennett, she said, looking toward Rachel, you saw the code. Rachel froze. Holloway turned toward her. Did you? Rachel hesitated. I saw an executive-level approval mark. Karen's posture changed almost imperceptibly. Those codes can be copied. Ethan shook his head. Not from outside the internal network. Holloway finally unfolded the document. He read the first page, then the second. His eyes moved faster as he approached the final sheet. Alicia watched his confidence begin to thin, but before he reached the signature line, Karen stepped forward and placed her hand over the bottom of the page. The credentials still need independent confirmation, she said. Holloway looked at her, then at Alicia. Do you have identification proving you are the person named here? It is in my wallet, Alicia answered. The wallet your officer placed on the floor. Rachel crouched beside the leather bag and opened it carefully. Inside, behind the driver's license, was a black metal credential card bearing the Meridian Federal seal. She pulled it free. The card felt heavier than plastic, cool beneath her fingers. Rachel read the name, then the title beneath it. Her expression emptied. She looked across the lobby at the large silver Meridian emblem mounted behind the counter. Then she looked back at Alicia. Holloway noticed the change in her face. What does it say? Rachel stood slowly and handed him the card. He read it once. Then again. Karen stepped closer, but Rachel did not release it. The silver letters were clear beneath the fluorescent light, Alicia Monroe, Chief Executive Officer, Meridian Federal Bank. No one spoke. Alicia met Holloway's eyes. Now, she said quietly, finish reading the page. Holloway lowered his eyes to the final page. The authorization line carried Alicia's full name, her executive identification number, and a digital signature registered through Meridian Federal's highest security tier. Beneath it, the transaction status read approved without restriction. His grip loosened around the document. Rachel watched him read every word he had ignored minutes earlier. Karen leaned over the counter, her face tightening as she searched for another explanation. A credential card can be stolen, she said. A signature can be copied. Ethan looked at her in disbelief. The approval was created from the executive network yesterday afternoon. The system verified the device, location, and security token. Karen turned sharply. You are not qualified to make that conclusion. The system already made it, Ethan replied. Alicia remained still, the metal around her wrists cold against the worn sleeves of her mother's coat. Holloway looked from the document to the credential card, then toward the silver meridian seal mounted behind the counter. For the first time since entering the branch, he seemed uncertain about where authority actually stood. "Officer Bennett," he said, "call the number listed on the account." Rachel reached for the desk phone, but Karen stepped between her and the counter. "I am the branch manager. Any executive verification should go through me." Alicia's gaze settled on her. "You had that option before you called the police." Karen's lips pressed together. Rachel picked up the receiver and dialed the internal number printed beneath the authorization code. The call connected immediately. A recorded security prompt requested the branch identification, the transaction number, and the officer's badge number. Rachel entered each one. The line clicked, followed by the voice of a man who identified himself as Jonathan Pierce, chairman of the Meridian Federal Board. "Who is requesting verification?" he asked. Rachel swallowed. "Officer Rachel Bennett. We have a woman here claiming to be Alicia Monroe." Silence followed. Not confusion. Not hesitation. The kind of silence that arrives when the wrong words have already been spoken. "Claiming," Pierce repeated. Rachel glanced at Alicia. "She is being detained during a suspected impersonation investigation." Pierce's voice changed. "Remove the restraints immediately. Ms. Monroe is the Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Federal Bank. Her identity and transaction were verified yesterday by corporate security." Holloway stared at the telephone. Karen's hand slipped from the edge of the counter. Rachel placed the receiver down and moved toward Alicia. "I am going to remove these now," she said softly. Two small clicks broke the silence. Alicia brought her hands forward and rubbed one wrist beneath the wool cuff. She did not look relieved. She looked tired. Holloway held out the credential card. "Ms. Monroe, there appears to have been a serious misunderstanding." Alicia did not take it. "A misunderstanding happens when facts are unclear." "You had the facts." Holloway's face hardened defensively. "We responded to information from bank management. And when the teller gave you evidence, you dismissed him. When your partner saw the approval code, you ignored her concern. When I asked what evidence you had, you gave me an order instead of an answer." No one in the lobby moved. Karen reached for the telephone. "I need to speak with Mr. Pierce privately." Alicia turned toward her. "No. The conversation stays here." At that moment, every teller screen displayed a corporate security notice. Executive Incident Review activated. Preserve all records. Do not alter transaction logs. Ethan looked at the message, then at Alicia. Karen's face lost what little color remained. Pierce's voice returned through the speaker. "Ms. Monroe, the title company has called twice. The property seller will hold the agreement until noon, but not beyond." Alicia checked the clock above the lobby doors. 11:23. 37 minutes remained. She looked toward the cashier's check request still waiting on the screen. "Complete the transaction," she said. Karen hesitated. Alicia's voice remained quiet. "Not because I am your chief executive officer. Because the account is valid, the funds are verified, and the customer has met every requirement." Ethan stepped back to his terminal. Karen did not move. Holloway watched Alicia as the truth settled across the room, but the expression on her face told him something worse than embarrassment was coming. Her credentials had proven who she was. They had not erased what he had chosen to believe before he knew. Ethan returned to the terminal and entered the transaction number again. The system unlocked under the Executive Incident Review, then displayed the same green approval that had been visible from the beginning. Karen stood beside him, no longer giving instructions. Her eyes remained fixed on the clock above the doors. 11:24. "The cashier's check requires a second authorization," Ethan said. "The branch manager normally completes it." Alicia looked at Karen. "Then complete it." Karen moved toward the screen, but her fingers hovered above the keyboard. "Ms. Monroe, I want to apologize before we continue." Alicia's expression did not change. "The title company does not need your apology. It needs the certified funds. Karen entered her credentials. The printer behind the counter awakened with a low mechanical hum. Holloway shifted his weight near the waiting area, the unread document still in his hand. Rachel stood several feet from Alicia, holding the black executive card as though returning it too quickly would make the moment disappear. "Your identification," Rachel said quietly. Alicia accepted the card and placed it inside her wallet. "Thank you." The courtesy in her voice made Rachel look down. Ethan removed the cashier's check from the printer and inspected every line. Payable to East Mercer Title and Escrow. $50,000. The date, security watermark, and authorized signature were correct. He placed it inside a bank envelope, but before sealing it, Alicia asked him to wait. "Print the transaction history." Karen's head lifted. "For your records." "For the investigation." The word changed the air again. Holloway stepped forward. "Ms. Monroe, we have acknowledged the mistake." Alicia turned toward him. "You acknowledged my title. That is not the same as acknowledging the mistake." He glanced at the customers still watching. "We acted on a report of possible fraud. You acted before reviewing the evidence attached to that report." Holloway's voice tightened. "Bank management told us the account holder might be an imposter." Ethan removed several pages from the printer. "The identity scan matched before the police arrived," he said. Karen looked at him sharply, but the authority in her stare was gone. Ethan placed the report on the counter. The first page showed Alicia's identification verification at 10:17. The second showed corporate approval from the previous afternoon. The third showed an internal fraud hold entered by Karen at 10:26, 9 minutes after the system had confirmed Alicia's identity. Alicia read the timestamp. "What changed during those 9 minutes?" Karen's face became still. "You refused additional questions. Questions that were not required. I considered your behavior unusual." Alicia slid the page toward her. "Write down which behavior created a legitimate fraud concern." Karen looked at the blank note field on the report. The customers nearby seemed to lean closer without moving. She finally said, "You appeared defensive." Alicia's voice softened, but not with kindness. "I asked you to follow your own process." Karen said nothing. Rachel stepped toward the counter and examined the timeline. "The fraud hold came after identity confirmation." Ethan nodded. "Yes." Holloway looked at Karen. "You told dispatch the identification could not be verified." Karen's lips parted. "I believe the verification might have been compromised." "Did corporate security tell you that?" Alicia asked. "No." "Did the system produce an alert?" "No." "Did Ethan report a discrepancy?" Karen looked toward him. "No." The answers came smaller each time. Alicia placed one finger beside the timestamp. "Then your suspicion was not based on the account. It was based on the person standing in front of you." Karen's eyes filled with shame, but Alicia did not look away. The cashier's check waited between them, clean and official, proof that the transaction had never been the problem. Outside, sunlight broke through the thinning clouds and spread across the marble floor. Alicia sealed the envelope and placed it inside her worn leather bag. 11:31. 29 minutes remained. She could still reach the title company, but she did not leave. Instead, she turned to Ethan. "Preserve every system note, every call record, and every camera angle from the moment I entered." Then she looked at Rachel. "Contact your supervisor and ask that Officer Holloway remain until the initial review is complete." Holloway stared at her. "You cannot detain me." Alicia met his eyes. "No. But the truth can." Rachel stepped away from the counter and called her supervisor from the lobby phone. Her voice was low and precise as she reported the verified account, the executive credentials, the timeline, and the fact that Alicia had been restrained before the approval record was fully reviewed. Holloway stood near the entrance with his arms at his sides, listening without interrupting. Karen remained behind the counter, staring at the fraud hold she had created. Ethan printed the camera preservation request and placed it beside the transaction history. Alicia checked the clock again. 11:33. The title company was less than 15 minutes away, but leaving now would mean allowing everyone in the room to shape the story after she was gone. She took out her phone and called the closing attorney. "This is Alicia Monroe. I have the certified funds. I am delayed by an incident at the bank." She listened for several seconds. "Please ask the seller to remain until noon. I will be there." When the call ended, Jonathan Pierce was still connected through the speakerphone. "Corporate security is reviewing the branch records now," he said. "There is something else you need to know." Alicia looked toward the phone. "What is it?" "This is not the first complaint involving enhanced verification at this location." Karen raised her head. Pierce continued. "There are 6 prior customer complaints from the last 14 months. 4 were closed by branch management. 2 were referred back as insufficiently documented." The words settled heavily over the lobby. Alicia turned toward Karen. "Did you review those complaints?" Karen's face tightened. "Some of them." "How many involved customers of color?" Karen did not answer. Pierce did. 5. Ethan lowered his eyes. Rachel stopped writing. Holloway looked toward the floor as though the pattern had become more difficult to dismiss than any single decision. Alicia felt the old wool of her mother's coat against her wrists and remembered the bus ride home from the branch on East Mercer Street. Her mother had not complained. She had believed no one would listen. That silence had followed Alicia for 30 years. Now she stood inside a bank carrying the authority to force a record open, and the thought brought no satisfaction. "Send every complaint to independent compliance," Alicia said. "Remove this branch from internal control of the review." Karen stepped forward. "Alicia, I understand how this appears." Alicia looked at her. "Do not use my first name to make this feel smaller." Karen stopped. "Ms. Monroe, I was trying to protect the bank." "From whom?" The question was quiet. Karen glanced toward the customers, the cameras, and the transaction record. No answer came. Ethan opened one of the archived complaint summaries on his screen. "One customer was a black veteran depositing a settlement check," he said. "Another was a Latina restaurant owner requesting a business wire. Both were delayed for additional verification after their identification had already cleared." Karen closed her eyes briefly. "Those were different circumstances." Alicia stepped closer to the counter. "Different people. The same language." She pointed to the notes on the screen. "Unusual behavior. Inconsistent profile. Defensive response. Additional concern." Each phrase sounded neutral by itself. Together, they formed a wall. Rachel ended her call. "Captain Daniel Price is on his way. He asked Officer Holloway to remain here until he arrives." Holloway nodded once, but his jaw tightened. "I did not create those branch reports." Alicia turned toward him. "No. You created your own decision today." He looked at the folded approval pages in his hand. "I trusted the manager." "You trusted her suspicion more than Ethan's evidence." Holloway looked toward Ethan for the first time without dismissal. The young teller met his eyes but said nothing. Alicia picked up her leather bag and felt the hard edge of the cashier's check inside. 11:38. She still had time to save the property deal, but the building on East Mercer Street no longer felt like the only thing at stake. "Mr. Pierce," she said, "place Karen Whitmore on administrative leave pending independent review. Protect Ethan from retaliation. Preserve every complaint, every override, and every recording connected to this branch." Karen's shoulders fell. "Are you firing me?" Alicia's expression remained steady. "I am refusing to decide your future in anger. The evidence will decide what happens next." Outside, the clouds finally opened to a pale strip of blue. Alicia turned toward the doors, then stopped beside Holloway. "The truth should not begin to matter only after you discover the person you judged as power." Holloway looked at her, but no defense came. For the first time that morning, he had nothing left to say. Alicia reached the title company at 11:51, carrying the sealed bank envelope beneath one arm and her mother's navy coat folded tightly around her. The office occupied the second floor of an old brick building on East Mercer Street, directly across from the vacant property she hoped to purchase. Through the conference room window, she could see the faded stone entrance, the boarded lower windows, and the rusted metal frame where a Meridian branch sign had once hung. 30 years earlier, her mother had walked through those doors with every document required to open an account. She had returned home carrying the same papers untouched. Now Alicia placed the $50,000 cashier's check on the table where the seller, the closing attorney, and 2 foundation representatives had been waiting. "The funds are certified," the attorney said after checking the watermark and authorization number. The seller glanced at the clock. 9 minutes to spare. Alicia signed the final agreement without smiling. The pen moved steadily across the page, but her thoughts remained inside the bank lobby. Ethan holding the evidence no one wanted to read. Rachel recognizing the approval code and hesitating. Holloway trusting a suspicion because it came from the person standing behind the counter. Karen using professional language to disguise a conclusion she had reached before asking a single required question. The attorney pushed the deed toward Alicia. "The building belongs to the foundation." Quiet applause rose around the table. Alicia looked across the street at the abandoned branch. She had imagined this moment for years, but victory felt different after what had happened. The property was secured. The problem was not. Her phone vibrated beside the closing documents. Jonathan Pierce had sent the preliminary compliance report. 6 prior complaints. 5 customers of color. Foreclosed under Karen's authority. 1 included security footage that had never been reviewed beyond the branch. Alicia opened the first summary. A black veteran had been asked to wait nearly 2 hours while depositing a government settlement check. The employee notes described him as impatient and evasive, although the recording showed him sitting silently with his identification on the table. The second case involved a Latina restaurant owner whose business wire had been delayed until she missed a supplier deadline. The third involved an elderly black couple questioned separately about savings accumulated over 40 years. Each report ended with the same conclusion: procedure followed, no evidence of discrimination. Alicia read the words twice. Then she looked at the empty building across the street. Her mother's story had not been an isolated memory. It was part of a language institutions used when they wanted harm to appear neutral. Additional caution. Unusual profile. Customer resistance. Terms clean enough to survive an audit, yet sharp enough to deny dignity. One of the foundation representatives, a retired teacher named Denise Carter, noticed Alicia's expression. "Is something wrong with the purchase?" "No," Alicia said. "The purchase is complete." She closed the report. "But the center needs to become more than we planned." The original design included classrooms for budgeting, credit, and small business education. Alicia now added a public advocacy office where families could document financial discrimination, receive legal referrals, and learn how to challenge decisions made without evidence. The foundation board approved the expansion before leaving the room. As afternoon light moved across the conference table, Alicia stood alone beside the window. Workers would soon remove the boards and restore the entrance. Children would sit where customers had once been judged before they were heard. Across town, Captain Daniel Price had arrived at the Meridian branch. Rachel gave him the timeline without protecting herself. Holloway admitted he had not finished reading the authorization before restraining Alicia. Karen remained in her office until corporate security escorted her out on administrative leave. Ethan stayed at his terminal, preserving every record. None of them knew what Alicia had just decided. She placed one hand against the cold window and studied the old bank entrance below. The credentials in her wallet had changed how people treated her. The new center would teach people how to protect themselves when they had no title powerful enough to force the truth into the room. 3 weeks later, the independent review began in a glass conference room at Meridian Federal Headquarters. Alicia sat at one end of the table with Jonathan Pierce and 2 outside compliance attorneys. Across from them were Karen, Holloway, Rachel, Captain Daniel Price, and Ethan. No one wore the expression they had carried inside the branch. The confidence was gone. In its place was the careful stillness of people waiting to hear what the record had preserved. A large screen displayed the timeline from that morning. 10:17, identity verified. 10:26, internal fraud hold entered. 10:34, police contacted. 10:41, executive authorization page provided. 10:43, Alicia restrained. 10:48, credential discovered. The sequence left little room for interpretation. One of the attorneys paused the security footage at the moment Ethan extended the approval pages toward Holloway. "Officer Holloway, what prevented you from reading the entire document?" Holloway looked at the frozen image of his own hand folding the pages. "I believed the branch manager had already confirmed a serious discrepancy." "Did she identify a discrepancy?" "She reported possible impersonation." The attorney changed the screen to the dispatch transcript. Karen's voice filled the room, composed and certain, describing Alicia as evasive, defensive, and potentially in possession of another customer's identification. Alicia listened without moving. The words sounded worse outside the urgency of the moment. Cleaner. More deliberate. "Ms. Whitmore," the attorney said, "what evidence supported the claim that the identification belonged to someone else?" Karen lowered her eyes. There was no direct evidence. What evidence supported the fraud hold? Her refusal to answer additional questions. Ethan spoke quietly. "Those questions were not required by policy." Karen nodded once. "I know that now." Alicia looked at her. "You knew it then?" Karen's face tightened. "I knew they were not mandatory. I told myself caution justified asking them anyway." "Would you have asked the same questions if the customer had looked like someone you expected to hold that balance?" Karen did not answer immediately. The silence was not confusion. It was recognition. "No," she said at last. Holloway shifted in his chair. Captain Price turned toward him. Officer Bennett raised concern about the executive code before the restraints were applied. "Why did you dismiss it?" Holloway looked at Rachel. "I thought she was uncertain." Rachel met his eyes. "I was uncertain about challenging you. I was not uncertain about the code." The distinction settled heavily over the table. Holloway looked down at his hands. "I made a judgment call." Alicia's voice entered the room, calm and direct. "A judgment call based on what?" Holloway lifted his eyes. "The manager's report. Your refusal to answer. The situation." The situation included verified identification, an approved transaction, a teller explaining the system, and your partner asking you to slow down. Alicia leaned forward slightly. "What remained after you removed the evidence?" Holloway's face changed. "Not dramatically. Just enough for the defense to leave it." "My assumption," he said. No one spoke for several seconds. The attorney advanced to the 6 earlier complaints. Each case showed the same pattern. Verification completed, additional suspicion added, customer behavior described as defensive, complaint closed without independent review. Karen watched every summary appear. When the elderly couple's footage played, she covered her mouth with one hand. They sat side by side for 90 minutes while employees questioned whether their savings were truly theirs. The husband kept his hat in his lap. The wife held every statement in perfect order. "I closed that complaint," Karen whispered. Alicia looked at her. "Yes." Karen's voice broke. "I thought the staff had followed procedure." "You checked whether the boxes were filled," Alicia said. "You did not check what the boxes were hiding." Jonathan Pierce placed the final report on the table. Karen would be removed from management and placed under a corrective employment plan pending customer meetings and retraining. Holloway would face departmental discipline and mandatory bias review. Rachel would receive a formal reprimand for failing to intervene, but her full testimony would be included in the record. Ethan would be promoted to Regional Customer Integrity Specialist. Ethan looked toward Alicia, surprised. "I only told the truth." Alicia nodded. "That is exactly why." Karen looked at the resignation letter in front of her. "Would it be easier if I left?" Alicia studied her for a moment. "Easier for whom?" Karen had no answer. Alicia continued. "Leaving can end your discomfort. It does not repair what happened. If you remain, you will listen to the customers whose complaints you dismissed. You will not explain your intentions. You will hear the consequences." Karen slowly folded the resignation letter and placed it back inside her folder. Holloway looked toward Alicia. "What do you want from me?" She held his gaze. "I want the next person without a title, without a board chairman, and without a room full of cameras to receive the patients you denied me. Outside the glass walls, employees moved through the headquarters carrying files and coffee, unaware that anything had changed. Inside, the truth no longer needed Alicia's credentials to survive. It had become part of the record. 2 months later, Karen entered a small community meeting room carrying no folder, no prepared statement, and no title beneath her name. 3 former customers sat across from her. The black veteran whose settlement check had been delayed rested both hands on a wooden cane. The Latina restaurant owner placed a canceled supplier contract on the table. Beside them, the elderly couple sat shoulder to shoulder, their bank statements arranged in a careful stack. Alicia remained near the back wall with an independent mediator, present only to ensure the meeting stayed honest. Karen began with an apology, but the veteran raised one hand. "Before you explain what you meant," he said, "listen to what it did." Karen closed her mouth. He described waiting beneath the branch clock while employees whispered behind glass. He had served 22 years in the Army, carried identification issued by the federal government, and still found himself answering questions about whether the money belonged to him. The restaurant owner spoke next. Her delayed wire caused a food shipment to be canceled before a holiday weekend. She lost inventory, wages, and the trust of a supplier she had worked with for 6 years. "Your note said I became emotional," she told Karen. "I was watching my business lose money while you treated my urgency as evidence against me." Karen looked at the cancelled contract but did not defend herself. Then the elderly woman slid one statement across the table. "You asked my husband where he got the savings," she said. "He worked nights for 38 years. I worked days for 34. We did not need permission to own what we earned." Her husband kept his hat in his lap, just as he had in the security footage. "I stopped going inside banks after that," he said. "My daughter handles everything now." Karen's eyes filled, but Alicia watched carefully. Tears could become another way to move attention back toward the person who caused harm. Karen seemed to understand. She wiped her face once and said, "I cannot ask you to forgive me. I can only admit that I made your lives harder because I trusted assumptions I called experience." The veteran leaned back. "What are you going to do with that admission?" Karen looked toward Alicia, then stopped herself. The answer had to belong to her. "I will complete the corrective program. I will help review every discretionary hold from the past 2 years. I will document what I failed to see, and I will not call my intentions proof of fairness again." No one offered absolution. The restaurant owner collected her contract. The elderly couple stood together. The veteran gave Karen a quiet nod, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement that she had finally listened. Across town, Holloway attended his 4th departmental training session. He had resisted the first 3, speaking in the careful language of officer safety and incomplete information. During the 4th, the instructor played the bank footage without identifying anyone. Holloway watched himself fold the authorization pages, dismiss Rachel, and turn Alicia's questions into defiance. When the video stopped, the instructor asked the room, "At what moment did the evidence stop guiding the decision?" Holloway looked at the frozen screen. "When I decided who was credible before I finished reading," he said. It was the first answer he gave without defending himself. Rachel, meanwhile, had returned to duty under supervision. One rainy afternoon, she responded to another call involving a black college student whose account had been frozen after a large scholarship deposit. The branch employee described him as agitated. Rachel asked for the documents first. The identification matched. The deposit was legitimate. The student left with his account restored and no public scene. There were no cameras, no praise, and no executive title waiting to expose a mistake. That was why the moment mattered. Ethan visited the East Mercer property every Friday after work. Construction crews had removed the boards, restored the windows, and uncovered the original stone beneath decades of paint. Alicia met him there one evening as warm light spilled across the unfinished classrooms. "The advocacy office will be ready by opening day," he said. Alicia nodded. "And the training program?" "Built from the real complaints, with customer permission. No names. No excuses." They walked through the former lobby where her mother had once been turned away. The old teller counter was gone. In its place stood a long table low enough for children to sit on both sides. Alicia placed her hand on the smooth wood. Accountability had not restored every lost hour, every missed payment, or every measure of trust. It had done something more difficult. It had forced people to see the harm without hiding behind intention, and it had given them a chance to choose differently before another person paid the price. 6 months later, the old East Mercer branch opened its doors again, but no teller windows waited inside and no manager stood behind glass. The restored stone entrance now carried a simple brass sign, Monroe Community Financial Center. Morning sunlight poured through the tall windows and warmed the long wooden tables where teenagers, parents, veterans, and small business owners sat beside volunteer counselors. In the front classroom, Ethan guided a 13-year-old black girl through her first savings account application. She held a $10 bill between both hands, reading every line before signing her name. "Take your time," Ethan told her. "Nothing should move faster than your understanding." Alicia stood near the back of the room wearing her mother's navy coat over a cream blouse. The sleeves had been repaired, but the fabric still carried the softness of age. Beside her was a narrow glass case containing the unopened account packet her mother had brought home 30 years earlier, a faded bus transfer, and a copy of the new customer rights guide distributed throughout every Meridian Federal branch. Beneath the display, a small plaque read, "Dignity should never depend on status." Jonathan Pierce approached with the final independent review report. Meridian had changed its verification policy nationwide. Northwest employee could place a discretionary fraud hold after identity confirmation without documented evidence and secondary approval. Every customer complaint now went directly to an independent team. Training materials included anonymized versions of the East Mercer cases, built from the voices of the people who had lived through them. Karen had completed the first stage of her corrective program and remained outside management. She now reviewed complaint language for hidden assumptions and attended customer meetings without offering excuses. Holloway returned to duty after suspension and retraining under Captain Daniel Price. His record carried the finding that he had acted on assumption before evidence. Months later, during a call at another bank, he stopped the questioning, read every document, and allowed a black customer to leave without humiliation. No one recorded the moment. No one praised him. The absence of harm was the only proof that he had learned. Rachel stood near the center entrance in civilian clothes, listening as the same black veteran from the complaint review spoke to a group of new officers about credibility, patience, and the danger of treating authority as truth. When the session ended, Rachel approached Alicia. "I used to think courage meant making the right decision under pressure," she said. "Now I think it begins earlier, when you notice something is wrong and decide not to stay quiet." Alicia looked toward the girl completing her account form. "Then remember that before the pressure arrives." Rachel nodded. She did not ask for forgiveness. She had learned that change mattered more than being reassured. At the front table, Ethan stamped the girl's application approved and slid a small account booklet toward her. Her mother stood beside her, smiling through tears. The girl looked at Alicia. "Did you build this place?" Alicia glanced around the room, at the veteran teaching officers, the restaurant owner advising new entrepreneurs, the elderly couple helping families organize financial records, and the counselors explaining every form without judgment. "A lot of people built it," she said. The girl placed her $10 bill into the deposit envelope and signed the final line. The pen made a soft scratching sound across the paper. Alicia felt the old bus transfer through the glass case beneath her fingertips. Her mother had once left this building believing that documents could be correct and still not be enough. Today, a child sat in the same space and was treated as someone whose future mattered before anyone knew what title she might carry. That was the real change. Not the moment credentials forced a room to listen, but the day listening no longer required credentials at all. Alicia stepped away from the display and allowed the center to continue without her. Sunlight moved across the tables, touching signatures, account books, and open hands. Kindness had not weakened justice. It had given justice a purpose. Accountability had not erased the past. It had prevented the past from becoming policy for another generation. And somewhere beyond that room, another person would soon be questioned, doubted, or judged before the facts were known. When that moment comes, who do you believe should speak first?